In a land of mountains and clear streams, a baby boy was born who would one day shake the world. This happened in Pella, the capital of Macedonia, in the summer of 356 BC. Lightning filled the sky on the night Alexander came into the world. Many took this as a sign from the gods. His father was King Philip II, a tough, one-eyed warrior who had made Macedonia strong. His mother was Olympias, a fierce woman from Epirus, who some said practiced secret rituals. From his first days, strange tales surrounded the child. Olympias claimed that a god, not Philip, had fathered her son. She told everyone that a snake had visited her bed, a sign that divine blood ran in Alexander's veins. "This boy is meant for great things," she would whisper to him at night. "You are born to rule not just a kingdom, but the world." King Philip watched his son grow with both pride and worry. The boy was quick to learn, brave beyond his years, and hungry for stories of heroes. Philip saw himself in the child, but also something more, something that could be either wonderful or dangerous. As a young boy, Alexander loved the epic tales of Homer. He kept a copy of the Iliad under his pillow and dreamed of being like Achilles, the greatest warrior of the Trojan War. "I would rather live a short life full of glory than a long life of nothing," he told his childhood friends. When Alexander turned 13, King Philip decided his son needed the best teacher in Greece. He sent for Aristotle, the famous philosopher who had studied under Plato. For 3 years, Aristotle taught Alexander about plants, animals, poetry, politics, and the stars. The boy soaked up knowledge like dry earth soaks up rain. "Knowledge is power," Aristotle told him, "but wisdom is knowing how to use that power." Yet it was not all books and learning. Alexander trained hard with the Macedonian army, running in full armor, wrestling with older boys, and learning to fight with spear and sword. By 16, he could outride, outfight, and outthink most grown men. The most famous story of Alexander's youth happened when he was just 10 years old. King Philip was shown a magnificent black horse named Bucephalus. The horse was wild and beautiful, but no one could ride him. He reared and kicked at anyone who came near. The king's men were about to send the horse away when young Alexander spoke up. "I can ride him, father," he said. The grown men laughed, but Philip decided to let his son try. Alexander had noticed something the others had missed. The horse was afraid of his own shadow. The boy turned Bucephalus toward the sun, so the shadow fell behind them. Then he spoke softly to the horse and stroked his neck. Slowly, Alexander mounted the great black stallion. Instead of bucking, Bucephalus stood still, then began to walk, and finally to run. The watching crowd fell silent in amazement as boy and horse raced across the field and back. When Alexander returned, Philip had tears in his eyes. "My son," he said, "you must find a kingdom worthy of yourself, for Macedonia is too small for you." Bucephalus became Alexander's trusted companion, carrying him into battle for many years to come. As Alexander grew into a young man, his father gave him more responsibilities. At 16, while Philip was away fighting, Alexander served as regent of Macedonia. When a tribe in northern Greece rebelled, Alexander led an army against them and won his first victory. But the relationship between father and son was not always easy. Philip had many wives, as was the custom for kings, and Alexander feared his father might choose another son as his heir. When Philip married a young woman named Cleopatra, and she gave birth to a baby boy, Alexander felt threatened. At a feast celebrating Philip's newest marriage, a drunk nobleman suggested that Philip might now have a true heir instead of Alexander. Furious, Alexander threw his cup at the man's head. "Are you calling me a bastard?" he shouted. Philip, also drunk, drew his sword and lunged at his son, but fell to the floor. Alexander looked down at his father and said words that chilled the room. "Look at the man who prepares to cross from Europe to Asia, but cannot cross from one couch to another." After this fight, Alexander and his mother left the court for a time. Though they eventually returned, the trust between father and son was broken. In the summer of 336 BC, as Philip prepared for a great invasion of Persia, he was murdered by one of his bodyguards during his daughter's wedding feast. Alexander, not yet 20 years old, became king of Macedonia. Some whispered that he or his mother had planned the murder, but no proof was ever found. Standing over his father's body, the young king's face showed no grief, only determination. The world was now his to conquer. Alexander became king at 20 years old. Many thought he was too young and weak to rule. The tribes of Macedonia had respected his father, but they did not know if they could trust this boy king. Philip is dead, but Alexander lives, the young king told the gathered warriors. His voice was strong and clear. I will be a better king than my father. Follow me, and we will make Macedonia greater than ever before. Some believed him, but others did not. While Alexander secured his position in Macedonia, the Greek cities to the south saw their chance for freedom. For years, Philip had controlled them. Now they rebelled, thinking the young king would be easy to defeat. They were wrong. Alexander moved faster than anyone expected. He marched his army south into Greece before the cities could join forces. The speed of his attack shocked everyone. Within weeks, most cities surrendered without a fight. But Thebes, a proud city with a long history, decided to resist. They had once been a great power in Greece and did not want to bow to Macedonia. They fought bravely, but Alexander's army was too strong. After a short battle, Macedonian soldiers poured into the city. What happened next showed the world that Alexander could be as cruel as he was brave. He ordered Thebes destroyed. His soldiers killed 6,000 people and sold 30,000 more as slaves. They burned the temples and houses and tore down the walls. Only the home of the poet Pindar was spared because Alexander loved poetry. The destruction of Thebes sent a clear message to all of Greece: resist Alexander and be destroyed. Athens, the most powerful Greek city, quickly sent messengers asking for peace. Alexander was generous to them, as he admired Athenian culture and philosophy. With Greece under control, Alexander called a meeting of all Greek states at Corinth. There they named him leader of a great expedition against Persia, the old enemy of Greece. This had been his father's dream, and now Alexander would make it real. Before leaving Greece, Alexander visited the temple at Delphi to ask the oracle about his future. The priestess refused to give prophecies that day. Angry, Alexander dragged her by the arm toward the temple. "Let me go," she cried. "You are invincible." "My son," Alexander smiled. "That is all the answer I need," he said. In the spring of 334 BC, Alexander crossed the narrow sea between Europe and Asia with an army of about 40,000 men. This was small compared to the Persian forces, but his men were well-trained and loyal. Many had served under his father and were the best soldiers in the world. As his ship approached the Asian shore, Alexander threw his spear into the beach and jumped from the boat in full armor. He wanted to be the first to touch Asian soil. Standing on the beach, he declared, "I accept Asia," won by the spear. The Persian Empire was the largest the world had ever seen. It stretched from Egypt to India and had ruled for 200 years. Its king, Darius III, had millions of subjects and endless gold. Next to Persia, Macedonia seemed tiny and poor. Alexander's first battle in Asia came at the Granicus River. Persian forces waited on the far bank, ready to push the Macedonians back into the sea. Most generals would have been cautious, but Alexander was not most generals. He led the charge himself, riding Bucephalus into the river. The water was deep and the current strong, but Alexander pushed forward. A Persian noble swung his battle axe at Alexander's head, breaking part of his helmet. Before the man could strike again, Alexander drove his spear through the Persian's chest. The battle was fierce, but by sunset, the Persians were running away and Alexander had won his first victory. In Asia, instead of chasing the retreating Persians, he ordered his men to honor the Greek soldiers who had died fighting for Persia. Even to his enemies, Alexander showed respect for courage. After the victory, Alexander moved along the coast of Asia Minor, modern Turkey, freeing Greek cities from Persian rule. The people welcomed him as a liberator, throwing flowers as he entered their cities. In the city of Gordium, Alexander faced a different kind of challenge. There stood an ancient wagon tied with a knot so complex that no one had ever untied it. An old prophecy said that whoever undid the Gordian knot would rule all of Asia. For centuries, men had tried to untie it and failed. Alexander studied the knot, then looked at the watching crowd. Without a word, he drew his sword and cut through the knot with a single stroke. "That is how I solve problems," he said. Some said he had cheated, but others saw it as a sign. Alexander did not play by old rules. He made his own. News of the cut knot spread across Asia. In Persia, King Darius began to worry. This young Macedonian was not just another Greek troublemaker. He was something new and dangerous. Darius decided it was time to crush Alexander before he came any deeper into Persian lands. The two kings were moving toward each other, and the fate of the world would soon be decided. King Darius of Persia gathered a huge army to stop Alexander. He had soldiers from all parts of his vast empire, spearmen from Babylon, archers from Scythia, horsemen from Bactria, and even Greek mercenaries who fought for Persian gold. His army was 5 times larger than Alexander's. In the fall of 333 BC, the two armies met near a town called Issus, close to the Mediterranean Sea. Darius chose the battlefield carefully, picking a narrow plain between mountains and sea where Alexander couldn't use clever movements to outfight his larger army. The night before battle, Alexander slept soundly. When one of his generals, Parmenion, woke him to suggest a night attack, Alexander smiled. "I will not steal my victory," he said. "We will defeat Darius in open battle." With all the world watching, the next morning, Alexander rode along his battle line, calling out to his men by name, reminding them of past victories. His soldiers banged their spears against their shields, making a sound like thunder. Across the field, Darius watched from his war chariot. It was tall and decorated with gold and ivory. The Persian king wore purple robes and a high crown that made him easy to spot on the battlefield. When the battle began, Alexander led his best cavalry straight toward Darius. This was unusual. Most generals stayed back from the fighting, but Alexander always fought in the front, risking his life alongside his men. The battle was fierce. Dust filled the air, and the ground shook with thousands of feet. Blood turned the dirt to mud. For hours, neither side gained an advantage. Then Alexander saw his chance. There was a small gap in the Persian line, near where Darius stood in his chariot. Alexander led his horsemen straight for this gap, aiming directly at the Persian king. As Alexander got closer, Darius faced a choice that would change history. He could stand and fight the young Macedonian king face to face, or he could retreat to safety. Darius chose to flee. He turned his chariot around and rode away from the battle. When Persian soldiers saw their king running away, they lost heart and began to retreat too. What had been an organized army became a panicked crowd. Thousands were killed as they tried to escape. In Darius's abandoned camp, Alexander found the Persian king's family, his mother, his wife, and his children. In those days, captured royal women were usually treated badly, sometimes sold as slaves. But Alexander was different. "These women are now under my protection," he told his generals. "They will be treated with all the respect due to royalty." When Darius's mother mistakenly bowed to Alexander's friend Hephaestion, thinking he was Alexander because he was taller, Alexander said kindly, "You made no mistake, mother. He too is Alexander." This showed how much he valued his closest friend. After the victory at Issus, Alexander did not chase Darius into the heart of Persia. Instead, he turned south toward Egypt. He knew it was dangerous to leave enemies behind him, so he decided to secure the Mediterranean coast first. Most cities surrendered to him without a fight, but the city of Tyre resisted. Built on an island half a mile from shore, Tyre had high walls and a strong navy. Its people believed their city was impossible to capture. No army has ever taken Tyre. They told Alexander's messengers, "Not even the great kings of Babylon could conquer us." Alexander studied the city from the shore. "Then I will do what no one has done before," he said. He ordered his men to build a causeway, a road across the water to the island. For 7 months, Alexander's men worked to build this road while the people of Tyre attacked them with arrows, rocks, and fire. Many Macedonians died, but Alexander would not give up. Finally, the causeway reached the island, and Alexander's army stormed the city. The fall of Tyre shocked the world. Alexander had done the impossible. After this, his fame grew even greater. People began to wonder if he was truly part god, as his mother had claimed from Tyre. Alexander marched to Egypt. The Egyptians hated their Persian rulers and welcomed Alexander as a liberator. Without fighting a single battle, he became Pharaoh of Egypt, ruler of the oldest and most mysterious kingdom in the world. While in Egypt, Alexander did something that showed his vision for the future. At the mouth of the Nile River, he founded a new city and named it after himself, Alexandria. Unlike other conquerors who only destroyed, Alexander built. This city would later become the greatest center of learning in the ancient world, home to the famous Library of Alexandria. But the most important event in Egypt happened when Alexander traveled far into the western desert to visit a famous oracle at the oasis of Siwa. He went almost alone, telling no one what the oracle said to him. When he returned, Alexander was changed. He seemed more confident, more certain of his destiny. Some of his friends said the oracle had told him he was truly the son of a god. Others said he had been shown a map to the edge of the world. Whatever the truth, after Siwa, Alexander began to act less like a Greek king and more like an Eastern god king. He started to wear Persian clothes sometimes and adopted some Persian customs. This worried his Macedonian generals, who were proud of their Greek ways. "Remember who you are," Parmenion told him. "You are king of Macedonia, not Persia." Alexander looked at his old general with strange, distant eyes. "I am king of both," he said, "and soon, of much more." After conquering Egypt, Alexander turned his army east again. It was time to find Darius and finish what he had started. The Persian king had gathered a new army, even larger than before. They waited for Alexander on a wide plain near a village called Gaugamela. When Alexander's scouts reported how many Persians there were, some of his generals grew worried. "There are too many," said Parmenion. "We should attack at night when they won't see how few we are." Alexander shook his head. "I did not come this far to steal victories in the dark," he replied. "Besides, I do not intend to lose." The night before the battle, Alexander slept so deeply that his friends had to wake him. When it was time to fight, "How can you sleep so well before such danger?" one asked. "Why should I worry?" Alexander said. "Darius has already done the hardest work by gathering all our enemies in one place for us to defeat." The Battle of Gaugamela was Alexander's masterpiece. The Persians had more men, more horses, and even wore chariots with sharp blades on their wheels. But Alexander had a plan. He arranged his army at an angle to the Persian line. As the battle began, he moved to the right, drawing the Persian left wing after him. This created a gap in the Persian line. Alexander turned his horsemen and charged straight through this gap, heading directly for Darius. Once again, the Persian king fled rather than face Alexander, and once again, his army fell apart when their king ran away. The battle turned into a great victory for Alexander. This time, Alexander chased Darius for weeks. They raced across Persia. Finally, near a place called Ecbatana, Alexander learned that Darius had been arrested by one of his own generals, Bessus, who wanted to take power for himself. When Alexander finally caught up, he found Darius dead in a cart, stabbed by Bessus, and left to die. Though Darius had been his enemy, Alexander was angry at how the Persian king had been treated. He covered the body with his own cloak and ordered a royal funeral. He was a king, Alexander told his men, and kings, even enemy kings, deserve honor. Alexander now controlled the Persian Empire, the largest kingdom in the world. He was not just king of Macedonia anymore, but ruler of lands from Egypt to the edge of India. Most men would have stopped there, happy with such a huge empire. But Alexander was not most men. First, he marched his army to Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of Persia. This city held the greatest palace in the world and treasures beyond counting. For the first time, Alexander's men saw true wealth: gold cups, silver plates, jeweled swords, and piles of coins. The Macedonians, who had been poor soldiers from a small kingdom, could hardly believe their eyes. Alexander allowed his men to take some treasures as rewards for their years of fighting. but most of the wealth he kept to pay for his future plans. He was already thinking about conquering more lands to the east. For several months, Alexander stayed in Persepolis, organizing his new empire. He kept many Persian officials in their jobs if they were loyal to him. He even started to dress in partly Persian clothes and follow some Persian customs. This made his Macedonian officers uncomfortable. "You are becoming too much like them," complained Cletus, an old friend who had saved Alexander's life at the Granicus River. "Your father Philip would be ashamed." These words, spoken during a drunken feast, made Alexander furious. In his anger, he grabbed a spear and killed Cletus. As soon as he did it, Alexander was filled with regret. For 3 days, he refused to eat or drink, crying over the friend he had killed. "What is happening to me?" he asked Hephaestion, his closest companion. "Am I becoming a tyrant?" But the most famous event in Persepolis happened near the end of Alexander's stay. During another feast, where everyone had been drinking wine for hours, a Greek woman named Thais made a suggestion. "The Persians burned Athens years ago," she said. "Shouldn't we burn their palace in return?" Drunk and excited, Alexander led his friends with torches to the great palace. They set fire to the cedar beams, and soon the most beautiful building in Asia was in flames. The next morning, sober and regretful, Alexander ordered the fire put out. But it was too late. Much of the palace was destroyed. Years later, Alexander would say this was one of his greatest mistakes. The burning of Persepolis marked a turning point. Before, he had been careful to respect the places and people he conquered. After this, he became more reckless, more willing to destroy. From Persepolis, Alexander led his army northeast, into lands that even the Persians had never fully controlled. He was looking for Bessus, who had killed Darius and now called himself the new Persian king. The chase led them through deserts and over mountains. They marched through lands where no Greek had ever been. Alexander's men began to wonder when or if they would ever go home. In a remote fortress, they finally captured Bessus. Alexander had the traitor's nose and ears cut off, then sent him to be executed in the same place where he had killed Darius. Justice was done, but Alexander was already looking further east. "India lies beyond these mountains," he told his tired men, pointing to the massive peaks of the Hindu Kush, "and I intend to see it." Alexander led his army across the Hindu Kush mountains. The paths were narrow and dangerous. Snow covered the ground even in summer. Many horses and men fell from cliffs. Food was scarce, and the air was thin and hard to breathe. "No army has ever crossed these mountains," his guides told him. "Then we will be the first," Alexander replied. After weeks of hard travel, they reached the other side. Here was a new world, the land of Bactria and Sogdiana, today's Afghanistan and parts of Central Asia. The people here were fierce fighters who lived in mountain fortresses. They did not want to be ruled by anyone, not even Alexander. For 3 years, Alexander fought these mountain tribes. It was the hardest fighting his army had ever faced. The enemy would not meet them in open battle, but attacked in small groups, and then disappeared into the mountains. During this time, Alexander changed. He began to act more like an Eastern king and less like a Macedonian leader. He started to wear Persian clothes all the time and expected people to bow down before him, touching their foreheads to the ground. This was normal for Persians, but shocking to Greeks and Macedonians. "We are your companions in battle, not your slaves," one old soldier told him. Alexander had the man killed for speaking against him. More and more, he could not accept any criticism. Anyone who disagreed with him might be executed. His temper, always quick, became dangerous, yet he was still a brilliant general. In one famous battle, he captured a fortress built high on a cliff that everyone said was impossible to reach. The local people told him that only men with wings could take it. That night, Alexander asked for volunteers who were good at climbing. He offered prizes to the first men who reached the top of the cliff behind the fortress. 300 men volunteered. Using ropes and iron pegs, they climbed all night. Many fell to their deaths, but by morning, some had reached the top. When the defenders saw Macedonian soldiers above them, they surrendered in shock. "Truly," they said, "Alexander's men have wings." In Bactria, Alexander married a woman named Roxana. She was the daughter of a local chief and was said to be the most beautiful woman in Asia. This marriage was partly for love and partly for politics. By marrying a woman from this region, Alexander showed he wanted to bring East and West together. Finally, Alexander's army crossed the Indus River into India. They had now marched further east than any Western army in history. In India, they found strange new animals like elephants, which few Europeans had ever seen. They heard stories of even stranger things further east, men with ears so large they could wrap them around their bodies like blankets, and ants the size of foxes that dug for gold. Alexander wanted to see everything, to reach the eastern edge of the world, which he believed was not far away. But his men were tired. They had been marching and fighting for 8 years, always moving further from home. In India, Alexander fought his last great battle against King Porus, who had 100 war elephants in his army. The battle was hard, but Alexander won again. When Porus was brought before him as a prisoner, Alexander asked how he wanted to be treated. Like a king, Porus answered proudly. Alexander liked this answer so much that he gave Porus back his kingdom, only asking that he be an ally instead of an enemy. After defeating Porus, Alexander wanted to march further east to the Ganges River and beyond. But when he gave the order to move out, his army refused for the first time. They had reached their limit. "We have followed you across the world," said Coenus, speaking for the soldiers. "Many of us have wounds that never heal. All of us want to see our homes again before we die. Even you, Alexander, cannot march to the end of the world." Alexander was furious. He stayed in his tent for 3 days, refusing to speak to anyone. Finally, he came out and announced they would turn back, but he was not happy about it. To reach home, they marched south down the Indus River. This journey was as dangerous as any battle. They fought hostile tribes and traveled through the Jadrajan desert, where there was almost no water. More men died in this desert than in all of Alexander's battles combined. Through it all, Alexander shared every hardship with his men. When there was little water, he would not drink until everyone else had. Once, when soldiers brought him a helmet full of precious water, he poured it into the sand. "If my men cannot drink," he said, "neither will I." Finally, they reached Babylon, the greatest city in Mesopotamia. Alexander had been gone from the center of his empire for 6 years. Now he had plans to organize his huge kingdom and then conquer Arabia. But fate had other ideas. In June 323 BC, after a long night of drinking, Alexander fell sick with a fever. For 12 days, he grew weaker, his voice failed, and he could only communicate by moving his hands and eyes. On June 10th, Alexander died. He was just 32 years old and had conquered most of the known world. His last words, according to some, were to the strongest. He meant his empire should go to the strongest of his generals, but he did not name who that was. After his death, his generals fought over his empire. It broke into pieces, and the dream of uniting East and West died with Alexander. His body was placed in a golden coffin and taken to Egypt, where it was displayed in Alexandria, the city he had founded. Alexander had created the largest empire the world had ever seen, stretching from Greece to India. He had built new cities, opened trade routes, and spread Greek culture across Asia. Though his empire did not last, his legend never died. Even today, more than 2,300 years later, he is still known as Alexander the Great, the young king from Macedonia who conquered the world.